On December 23, 2022, Officer Azure responded to a frantic 911 call from a man claiming to have discovered his best friend's lifeless body in Lake Jackson Forest. Upon arrival, Officer Azure and his team meet the caller, Jamie, and his friend Robert, who urgently offer to guide the officer to the location of the body. Although the officer cannot yet confirm Robert's account, the situation demands immediate attention, and Officer Azure decides to follow Robert into the forest, despite the growing sense of unease. With no backup and alone with a stranger, the officer remains on high alert, aware that a killer could be lurking nearby. Deep in the woods, the officer encounters the grim scene. Wrapped in a tarp, the body of James Layden Decker lies in a pool of his own blood, mutilated by multiple cuts and wounds. Aware of the danger now surrounding him, Officer Azure orders Jamie to return to safety while he continues his investigation. Just as he begins to examine the body further, eerie sounds echo through the forest, raising the tension to a breaking point. Fortunately for Officer Azure, backup arrived just in time, offering some much-needed relief from the uncertainty and danger lurking in the forest. As medical personnel arrived and began to examine the body more closely, they uncovered signs of a brutal death. Blunt force trauma to the head, signs of strangulation, and something even more chilling: gasoline found in James's lungs and stomach. This raised a perplexing question for detectives. Why would a victim have gasoline inside them? This discovery was just the beginning of a series of disturbing revelations at the scene. By now, it was clear to the officers that they were dealing with a murder. The injuries to the body, the bloody knife, and the presence of gasoline all pointed to a calculated, torturous killing, suggesting that the victim had been held captive and tortured for hours before his death. With this grim understanding, officers returned to question Jamie, the 911 caller. What Jamie disclosed would soon lead investigators directly to the killer. Officers were preparing to speak with Jamie once more, one of the key eyewitnesses, who would soon provide them with their most crucial lead. Jamie revealed that earlier that day, a man named Dusty McDonald had attacked another man, Rick, with a hatchet. Although the police were called to the scene, they were unable to locate Dusty at the time. While this incident was alarming, it wasn't enough to immediately make Dusty the prime suspect. However, nearly every witness they spoke to pointed to Dusty as well. As the investigation unfolded, officers collected enough statements to justify bringing Dusty in for questioning. The next step was to track him down. Meanwhile, other officers remained at the scene, sitting down with the two 911 callers to piece together a timeline of the events. According to their accounts, the day had begun with strange signs that something was wrong. Based on these detailed witness statements, officers had formed a clearer picture of what likely transpired just hours before. And with Dusty McDonald now identified as the lead suspect, one of the officers couldn't help but recognize the name. By now, it was evident that Dusty McDonald was likely involved in the murder. With the statements from Jamie and Robert, police began to piece together the events leading up to the brutal killing. Earlier that day, Rick, another resident of the camp, had called 911 to report that Dusty McDonald had slashed his tent with a machete while searching for a man named James. Dusty had even threatened Rick during the confrontation. Later in the afternoon, Dusty managed to find James, and witnesses heard loud arguing coming from the camp. When they went to investigate, they saw Dusty wrestling with James, shouting at him. At the time, it didn't appear to be anything more than a heated argument, so the witnesses returned to their camp. However, as hours passed, nobody heard from James. Concerned, Robert and Jamie set out to look for him. That's when they discovered James's lifeless body, covered by a blue tarp. Nearly every witness statement aligned with this sequence of events, making the next step for officers clear. Dusty McDonald was their primary suspect, and it was time to bring him in for questioning. Officers moved quickly to arrest Dusty and bring him in for interrogation. Since they had already begun searching for him earlier in the day, they knew Dusty's address and surrounded the house, ready to make their move. From the moment they arrived, Dusty's behavior was erratic. He immediately claimed that James had tried to set him on fire and insisted that the officers, as he put it, already know what happened down there. Whether he was trying to assert that he acted in self-defense or was simply losing his grip on reality was unclear. With Dusty in custody, officers wrapped up the disturbing on-scene investigation and began preparing for interrogation. If Dusty was indeed the killer, The brutal nature of the crime pointed to someone with a deeply disturbed mindset, and that suspicion would soon be confirmed. By now, the evidence seemed overwhelming. Dusty had slashed Rick's tent and threatened him. Multiple witnesses had seen him arguing with James just hours before the murder. Yet, despite how clear the case seemed, there was one significant complication. Dusty was claiming self-defense. He insisted that James had thrown gasoline on him and threatened to set him on fire, a claim that could complicate the investigation and add an unexpected twist to the case. Detectives couldn't easily dismiss Dusty's self-defense claim, especially with the distinct smell of gasoline at the scene, which gave his story a shred of credibility. Even though the evidence seemed to point directly to him as the murderer, his narrative added an element of doubt that could potentially complicate the case. The detectives now had one clear goal: to break his story. They needed to either disprove his self-defense claim using witness statements, or, ideally, get him to confess. Either way, the investigation was about to get a lot more complicated. To move forward, detectives began bringing in individuals from the encampment who knew Dusty well and had interacted with him regularly. Rick, one of the witnesses, explained that Dusty often offered showers and laundry services to homeless individuals in the area, sometimes charging a small fee. Offering these services could be Dusty's way of asserting control over the homeless community, a tactic to keep them indebted to him. This detail became crucial, as it could help detectives build a stronger case against Dusty by showing a pattern of manipulation that could lead to violence. Dusty lived in a house near the homeless camps, a property owned by his grandfather. At first, much like Rick, others described Dusty as someone who seemed generous, offering members of the homeless community access to his home for basic necessities like showers and laundry. He had a history of strange and violent behavior, marked by paranoia and delusions. But the interviews so far had been too vague. Witnesses highlighted patterns of troubling behavior but couldn't provide concrete details to build a strong case. This led detectives to turn to Jamie, the original 911 caller, who had the clearest recollection of events. Jamie offered valuable insights into who Dusty really was. Though Dusty had a reputation as a bully, routinely harassing the homeless community, no one expected his behavior to escalate to cold-blooded murder. His so-called generosity, offering his home for showers and laundry, masked a deeper need for control and manipulation. The same individuals he claimed to help were the ones he also intimidated and threatened, revealing a warped sense of power and superiority. When Dusty was brought in for questioning, his demeanor was strangely calm. At this point, he appeared to see himself as a victim of an attack by the homeless man. He didn't seem to be in his right mind at all. Detectives hoped to learn more about Dusty's side of the story, but instead, they were met with incoherent delusions and deflections. Throughout his interrogation, Dusty's responses were filled with nonsense, making it harder to pin down the truth. In Dusty's mind, he's an owl, constantly watched, monitored, and under surveillance. It's clear that without his medication, his schizophrenia is spiraling out of control. Dusty seems to believe that he's outsmarted the cops, thinking he's there to provide valuable intelligence as the victim. But he'll soon realize that he's actually the primary suspect in the cold-blooded murder of an innocent man. "I haven't shed tears all day, you know," Dusty mutters, his voice unsettlingly calm. Listening closely to his words, it seems as if Dusty is unintentionally confessing to the murder. While his statements are scattered and unclear, they give detectives the impression that he's acknowledging his responsibility, though he doesn't fully grasp the gravity of what he's admitting. But Dusty's strange admissions don't stop there. His rambling continues, filled with incoherent thoughts and delusions. While his comments might seem like an open admission that James was his first murder, they're tangled in bizarre claims about retinoids, his photographic memory, and other nonsensical assertions. Detectives pick up on this and continue pushing him, trying to separate fact from fiction in his fractured account. They need to get through the delusions to uncover the truth behind the brutal murder. Dusty claims he's not mad and that people don't understand how he communicates. This shows he might have a twisted view of himself, possibly because of paranoia, delusions, or mental illness. What's strange is how calm and relieved Dusty seems. Most guilty people would be nervous or scared during an interrogation. But Dusty is different. He seems to still believe he's the victim, and doesn't grasp the seriousness of his actions. After this bizarre exchange, the detective had heard enough to know it was time to wrap up the interrogation. Dusty's lack of remorse and distorted grip on reality made it clear they were dealing with someone who didn't fully understand the weight of his actions. According to the pathology report, the victim, James Leidendecker, was subjected to horrific torture before his death. His body showed severe blunt force trauma, including cuts, bruises, and fractures to his face, nose, ears, and mouth. His eyes had severe bleeding and many of his teeth were broken. One of the most disturbing details from the report was that James had been exposed to gasoline. His skin had begun to slough off in areas, and a strong smell of gasoline was found on his arms, thighs, and hands. This made the murder even more gruesome. Dusty was processed for forensic evidence and transported to the Marion County detention facility. The witness statements, his vague confession, and the forensic evidence from the scene were enough to formally charge him. Dusty McDonald was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, and as of this video's upload, his case remains ongoing.